Kia ora, ko te Karakia. Tēnei mātou nā kaitaika o te kaunihira taio ki Waitaha. Kia wero tātou me te kōrerore whakauti. Awhina nā mahi i te tātou taio me nā hapori. Mā te piripono ka tūtuki kia tūturu hui ai tāhia.
Thank you, Councillor Burns, and can I just say welcome to the 559th meeting of the Canterbury Regional Council, and can I say it's just wonderful to see a lineup of citizens along the wall. I think this is the most people that we've had for deputations since we started, particularly since I've been here anyway. There's 5 this morning, so that will take some time to get through that. Can I just acknowledge the press? We've got Will Harvey from the press down in the corner there, and we've also got David Hill online. Now, David writes for various publications, but I think maybe the North Canterbury News at the moment. David, he also does write for Communities for Local Democracy. So, welcome, David, to this meeting also. And my apologies for the last meeting where we kicked the press out pretty early on in the day, and it wasn't probably a fair go. So, but we're going to have it. We're going to do our public PX at the end of this. I've got an apology from Councillor Southworth, who is on council business. Has any councillor got a conflict of interest at this point in time? There are no conflicts of interest. I'm being told there is a quorum, so we can get going. We have, as I've said, 5 public forum sessions today. And those people are in the room, so we don't need to invite them in. And we will start that process with Davina Powell. So Davina, if you wouldn't mind coming to the table, and Oliver will take care of your needs up there. Davina is here today to talk about human rights resolution regarding a right to a safe environment, specifically clean air, with specific implications for consenting and compliance of quarrying in this region. So welcome, Davina. 10 minutes, Davina, and I'll just not going to make any noise, but I'll just put my hand up when we're just about there, so it gives you an indication of that, and it'll be a really good opportunity for councillors to ask you questions of clarification towards the end of this session. So when you're ready, Davina.
Thank you. I have forwarded recording of the quarrying and impacts in the Aldous, as well as footage I obtained of a significant dust impact in Pan Road. At one stage, visibility for motorists was reduced to near zero due to the dust. No action was taken against any operator despite the evidence being provided. And a further key concern arose from this incident. Response to an official request for quarrying monitor data over that period does not correspond with data from other sources. In the graphs provided, no wind speed was shown as being higher than 3 to 4 metres per second. Yet on the date of the impact recorded, 40 kph was the norm for the day, with a high of 70.6 being shown. And there were many days in that 3-month period requested where wind speeds were significantly higher than shown on the provided report. And extremely low levels of PM10 in the graphs provided are also in question, where there's only one incident where more than 8 micrograms per cubic metre are indicated for any given day. And just to compare, the background rural monitor readings from the moat monitoring were significantly higher than that most days, in a rural setting away from quarries. The monthly averages for December to April for that rural setting were 15 to 21 micrograms. Are we ready to believe a rural farming environment, being left mainly in pasture, produces twice as much airborne PM10 than that of a quarry that is excavating, and in many cases, crushing rock for up to 12 hours a day, yet does not seem to cause the same health impacts as a location with half the amount of PM10? Data matters. The residents are aware that most monitors, if even present on site, are mobile. We're also aware that ECAN allowed some monitors to be netted, with one used by Winston's clearly being covered with what appeared to be mesh gauze, thus being a barrier to measuring full discharge. So yes, data is important, particularly if it is the primary or sole factor that is given weight when decision or policy making, and where that data is routinely used by applicants at consent hearings to support claims effects will be less than minor, or where the data is the primary source for decision making but is not robust, residents and the environment are being failed badly. Why doesn't ECAN routinely compare dust samples from the quarries and residential properties? It was done once and corroborated resident concerns. Why no follow-up or reporting regarding the data obtained from the personal monitoring? And why has ECAN failed to review a consent where the monitor for one site is several hundreds of metres from residents and is not downwind of the quarry, yet still rely on readings from this monitor whenever a dust impact is reported, resulting in residents being routinely fobbed off? With regard to the personal monitoring programme undertaken in the Althurst, the overriding concern is that of transparency. The withholding of the peer review report should never have happened. It was expert opinion the residents involved had a right to see. The withholding of that, I suggest, has been damaging. It has contributed to the continuing of the perceived lack of action by ECAN in protecting residents from harm, something they absolutely have a duty to address as the body responsible for discharge to air, as well as a legal duty under Section 23 of the Health Act. If this redacted report had been acknowledged and made public, I've no doubt there would have been pressure to take health impacts seriously, with the report then being relevant in the processing and granting of future consents. So can I ask, please bear this in mind with forthcoming applications. And now to my main reason for presenting today. With potential replacement of the RMA, now is the time to put things right. The UN resolution of the right to a safe environment extends expectations beyond central government level. This is from the Special Rapporteur report. Establish air quality legislation, regulations, standards and policies. Develop air quality action plans at the local, national and, if necessary, regional levels. Implement an air quality action plan and enforce the standards and evaluate progress. I indicated in the prior report that I would further discuss one of the recommendations today. As a reminder, that UN recommendation was as follows: refusing to issue permits for new polluting facilities or activities in areas that are air pollution hotspots until air quality in such areas meets national standards and will continue to meet those standards despite the additional pollution. This should lead to a moratorium on consents where there are people living in proximity to a proposed site or where there is already a cluster pollution hotspot of operations. The fact ECAN had not measured and did not have the means of measuring the pollutant as of December 2022, they cannot assure standards are even currently being met. Quarry monitors, where they exist, they're not in all quarries and many are mobile with questions regarding placement at any given time, cannot be used to verify compliance. There'll be obvious issues regarding the integrity and reliability of industry self-monitoring without secondary means of verifying reporting. A moratorium is needed on consenting of quarries until such time it can be proven that MOV standards are being complied with consistently over a long period of time, with factoring in of additional discharge from future consents granted. This requires quality and reliable ongoing monitoring undertaken by an independent authority whereby it will be scientifically sound. University involvement has been requested. This also been recommended by Professor of Canterbury University. Now I address my further requests and respectfully ask that due consideration is given. The Special Rapporteur report indicates that obligations have to be adopted at all levels, including regional and local level. With that, requirements and obligations as outlined in the report must be incorporated into the spatial planning documents, regional policy plans and district plans. And with regard to the spatial planning, I hope we see a clear indication that the reporting from the UN has been acknowledged with all the relevant recommendations incorporated. Please enforce consents fully and take action that will result in businesses being held to account. If there is requirement to fight a challenge in court, call on residents as witnesses. They will be more than happy to provide support with ample evidence of impacts. Please undertake a review of current quarry consents as permitted in the RMA, with conditions tightened or additional conditions applied to comply with HR obligations. Consent holders must no longer be confident that old, not fit for purpose, poor, weak, or conditions they had varied when requested will protect them from any comeback or requirement to improve their mitigation. Requests for changes to conditions by operators are readily processed and agreed, usually non-notified. Please offer the same courtesy to residents where conditions are clearly not fit for purpose. Requirement for applicants and consenting authorities, reporting staff, to comprehensively assess against all the UN requirements as part of the statutory assessment. And it can be assured residents will be doing this, whereby cherry picking or selective reporting by any party will be apparent. Under the NBA, there is to be oversight of council performance with regards to enforcement of consents, and this is welcomed by residents who have until now had no such recourse. We see it as long overdue. However, this should not lead to a two-tier system whereby ongoing consents under the RMA are not given the same regard due to such no oversight requirement. That will continue the current failings. All consents, when being enforced, must be given the same regard with requirements of UN reporting complied with. Spatial planning to include mandated setbacks measured from the quarry boundary of a minimum 1 kilometre to a residential property, regardless of whether it's extraction or processing. The GNS report from 2021 recommends 2 to 7 kilometres as being the ideal. So this high level acknowledgement of the need for realistic separation distances. The separation distance is the only fail-safe that can be relied on at all times for the duration of a consent, which may be up to 35 years. All quarry consents to be notified to residents within the setback distance. Evidence and experience from residents combined with known properties of quartz silica-based dust, along with Who reporting, should be prioritised over claims made by applicants supporting a request for non or limited notification. ECAN must demonstrate genuine concern regarding impacts on health and an understanding of dust dispersal properties. Application of the precautionary principle and margins of safety should be applied from the outset. Please, can there be compulsory reporting of health effects along with recommendations to decision makers for each application and hearing process? With this input being truly independent, i.e. coming from a health board specialist in respiratory issues, who also has knowledge of or background in impacts of pollution. Such report would have gravitas, correlating with Who reporting, as well as providing crucial information for decision makers. And it follows it must include cross-referencing with human rights obligations for all parties. If further monitoring is to occur, do not defer taking action in the meantime. Action needs to be taken now for current and forthcoming consents. Further consenting should require high mitigation standards, utilising measures shown in the Dust Control Handbook for mining and processing. This should mandate covered processing plants and conveyors with cage stockpiles as a minimum. Lou Wickham described this 406-page book as being a treasure trove of what is available for use in quarries. If residents have reported an impact and provided evidence, give that some credibility, and please stop requiring them to, in addition, provide a ridiculous amount of data to support the claim that can be easily attained by ECAN staff. This includes wind speeds and directions at the time of the incident. ECAN compliance should investigate and not fob off. And if there's an operator rebuttal of not supported by what our monitors say, verify the position of the monitor at the time of the occurrence. In addition, no more should residents' reports be dismissed with the wind was not high. The Ministry of the Environment advises that PM10 can disperse up to 1 kilometre in wind speeds of just 5 metres per second. To finish, communication is ongoing with the Human Rights Commission, and a report will be forwarded to the Special Rapporteur directly because, frankly, enough is enough. Based on resident feedback, ECAN staff still appear to only react to visible dust they see, which totally misses the point. PM10 as smaller is invisible is likely also present, but whereas the visible dust may fall out within the quarry boundary, the smaller particulate has greater dispersal capacity and is the cause of the health issues. As long as this focus on visible dust continues, residents will continue to suffer.
Good, thank you for that. Are there any questions from councillors of Davina? Councillor.
Davina, thanks so much for that. Hey, lots of really good information in there. I wanted to just delve into the issue about wind speed data, and wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about why that's important from your perspective.
So, there should be high levels of mitigation at all times. We're not just relying on the facts while it's hardly any wind. Also, rain comes into it because, I've learned from that book that I referred to, rain does not bring down airborne PM10.
Just push the button.
Sorry, rain does not bring down airborne PM10. The water droplet size has to be comparable to size of the particulate. So the wind or the air effect, it will not bring down PM10. So we've also had issues where ECAN compliance have dismissed reports from residents who've reported coughing and spluttering because there's crushing going on. And they said, oh, it's raining. It doesn't bring down airborne PM10.
Thank you very much for your chat. I agree with Councillor Pauling. It was really insightful, and there's a lot of information in that I feel I still need to absorb. But firstly, I think it's really good that for robustness that we use other research as well. Personally, from the likes of the university, and I really appreciate that comment you made and the professors wanting to get involved. I also, so did you say what your background was in research, or sorry?
Yeah, since 2018, I've been working on this consistently. In fact, I took 3 years off of work because of the amount of research I was doing. It was such a big subject. And I've used that research to hopefully help the others in the area. But yeah, it's something which I've learned a lot about. And I've also liaised with 2 professors or 2 scientists on this as well from university.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll call this to a, no, we won't. Councillor Pauling.
Yes, good. Yeah, kia ora again. Now, I really like the the points you made about linking it to the RMA reforms and spatial planning, the MBA, etc. And I heard some information in there about air quality action planning. Have you considered that further in terms of the current sort of ECAN air plan and how that could fit into that? Have you thought anything about that?
Not specifically. What we are aware of is the World Health Organization have reduced the recommended exposure limits. So that should be mandated as the absolute maximum. But with the margins of safety, which need to be incorporated, we have to be working lower than that because that is the absolute maximum. If you work to the maximum, then you've got no wiggle room at all. But I think the issue I had was when it's acknowledged that ECAN had no means of measuring PM10. I could not believe that. We've got PM10 causing these health issues, and it's not being measured. You just go by the visible dust, and that is missing the whole issue. That is a big concern.
This is we're coming to the end of this. Councillor Mackenzie, then Councillor Robinson, and then we're done.
Try to be brief, Mr. Chairman. We've had several presentations from people out by the airport who are worried about the dust from quarries, and there's a lot of sympathy around this table for the issues. I find it ironic, though, sitting here as a councillor with a lot of people who were saying, "Oh, we need to have land use change and things like that." And perhaps second to David East, I'm the oldest resident in this room from Canterbury, and when I was young, actually the big issue in Canterbury was actually dust storms coming down across the plains because of soil erosion. And of course, with irrigated dairy pastures, we've stopped all that, and now we've restricted dust exposure to relatively small exclusion zones around the Waimak, so where the quarrying takes place. So does your research tell us that in general Canterbury's health from dust is better, but just there are a smaller group around the quarries, of course, are still affected?
Sorry, I can obviously refer to the quartz-based silica dust, which is going to be related to the quarrying activities. The issue with the quarrying area in Yalthurst is they do extend. And once they've extended, that then neutralises the land next to it. It makes it unsaleable for residents. And it's happened already in Yalthurst, where one of the companies has just recently bought a property which was next to the quarry zone, and they're extending onto that. So they do extend beyond the quarry zone, and it will bring anybody in that area into that space, unfortunately, who probably 20 years ago, it would never have been a consideration.
I actually just seeking just clarity from staff through the chair, please, just whether or not we do measure.
We will leave the table and we'll attend to that, Davina. Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Davina, thank you very much for this. It's a pretty weighty document you brought in, and you've covered it in 10 minutes, so thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate I sent a lot of pre-information as well. Thank you.
You just wait, the resolution that you see on top of the table is how we're reacting to your deputations. So do I have someone to move that? Thank you, Councillor Swiggs, and thank you, Councillor Pauling, for seconding that. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against? That is carried. Thank you. I would just like to remind councillors that under our standing orders 20.11, the use of personal devices in the council meeting is prohibited, and the use of personal devices to take pictures is prohibited. Thank you. Now we're moving on to 12.1.2, and I'd like to welcome John to the table. John Kottier to the table. Kottier, that's what I did say. Kottier. So John Kottier, Program Manager, Kai Mihi for Nature, Te Hapū o Ngāti Wheke Rapaki, is here today to talk about the urgent action required to mitigate the spread of sabella, which is Mediterranean fanworm from Whakarapo to the areas outside our rohi, such as Wider Banks Peninsula and further afield. So welcome, John. We'll get going when you want to get going.
Okay, great. Thanks very much for having me, councillors, and Peter for inviting me or giving me the opportunity to talk. As Peter said, my name is John Kottier, born and bred in Littleton, grew up in Rapaki. I have a travel background of 38 years, been in business, and because of COVID, I've changed my career path to slightly reconnected with Rapaki and run the Kai Mihi for Nature program for Littleton Harbour, incorporating conservation volunteers, Living Springs, and Te Hapū Ngāti Wheke, and also the program manager for Tangata Tiaki, Tangata people, Tiaki, the protectors. So cover the gambit from the hilltops to the ocean floor. So the reason for me being here today is just to bring to your attention the situation of the harbour with invasive fanworm and invasive species per se, but today is focused on fanworm. And it's come to light just in the last month or so that there's been an outbreak in the outer harbour. When I refer to the outer harbour, I'm meaning outside Littleton Port Company's property, which is the moles, which we refer to as the inner harbour, to the outer harbour. So I've got a quick presentation here for you all. You have a look at that slide up the top there. You know, as we all know, all of us that have been on the water, love the water. We know it's a pristine place. But what we don't know is the carnage that is going on under the water. And that's what I'd like to bring to your attention today. So a brief, I'll leave this thing. Just a brief overview of sabella. It was detected in Littleton Inner Harbour in 2008. Word is that it came in on a frigate, and ECAN had given permission for it to be defouled in the harbour. And back in those days, you know, it wasn't pumped out to Bromley or those species were filtered out. It just went into the water, and that's where it started. Attempts were made by LPC and ECAN to eliminate the pest. Where efforts were suspended and a containment approach was adopted to confine the outbreak to the inner harbour and keep it suspended there. Biosecurity New Zealand contract NIWA to undertake a targeted surveillance in selected ports and marina, looking for invasive species that present a significant threat to New Zealand's marine biodiversity and aquaculture industries. And I want to stress here that it is a major threat to our aquaculture industries. Mediterranean fanworm, or sabella, is one of those organisms. Surveys take place every 6 months. So fanworm, to give you a bit of an idea, can live on most artificial and natural habitats in the marine environment. It prefers sheltered, nutrient-enriched waters, and we're a prime place, a prime country for invasive species to thrive. I mean, fanworm just naturally is controlled in the Mediterranean, but our conditions here where we have rich nutrient water, it just really thrives, as do most invasive species. It prefers shallow subtidal areas and depths of 1 to 30 metres. It attaches to solid surfaces, including artificial materials, as well as rocks, concrete, wood, steel, benthic organisms, you know, mussels, oysters, pipicockle, all of those things are under threat. In the Hauraki Gulf, the found fanworm attached to scallops, and as we know, scallops are under threat in the Hauraki Gulf. It can also be found on soft substrates, generally attached to small buried fragments of stone or rock. There's common fouling species on moored vessels, including car ferries, fishing boats, and pleasure craft. So I've got a few slides here. This is a mature fanworm. So they grow to about 600. So, you know, half a metre, just this sort of height. They form tight clusters on the ocean floor. They have 2 breeding cycles in a year. They breed from generally April through to September, releasing 50,000 spore in one event. So each one of these females can release 100,000 spore in an event, in 2 events over the course of a year. And they basically take over the entire benthic area that they possess. So they excrete ammonia and arsenic. So they have no natural predators here. They block out light. They're magnificent filterers, so they compete with our mussel species, all those sorts of things. And this is the main way that they travel around. That's on the hulls of boats, of yachts in particular. This is the bulb of a keel on a big yacht. So they form these tight clusters. So if you picture those bandworm turned upside down on that concrete surface, so this is up in Auckland, they could take that whole area you see in front of you over if that was in an aquatic environment. This was pulled out of the Hauraki Gulf. This is a mussel farm. This is one of the droppers where the mussels grow. And this is a major concern because they outcompete the mussels. That farm has totally had it. And this is in the viaduct harbour. So you can see under the pontoons, they're starting to form here in clusters. So give that another 2 years, that whole habitat there will be covered in fanworm. So you can picture Canary Island date palm. They form clusters. The light doesn't get through. They're magnificent filterers. This is a mussel farm, so a major threat to our industry. This is a picture of the port. So if we have a quick look at this, this is the areas that there's beside number 7 wharf there. There's major infestation around that number 7 wharf, particularly in Te Ana Marina, where the dry dock is and where Stark's cleaning facility is. And there's 3 derelict wharfs to the right of number 7. They need to come out of the water because they harbour. We know they harbour. We've had a submersible vessel go in and have a look in a survey, and there's populations of Underia in there unchecked. We're doing survey work. We can't get divers under those wharfs because they're derelict and they're unsafe. So that's a real breeding ground. The next slide was a survey done by LPC in March 2022. Those areas highlighted where they found Sabella. The 3 wharves I'm talking about, which are part of this plan, are to the right. So they're derelict. So we haven't been able to get divers under those wharfs. So LPC have been undertaking, with the help of ECAN, removal work to try and contain Sabella within that inner harbour area. But from February, we had reports that it's now out of that inner harbour. It's around Kottier Bay, Cass Bay. It's along Cash and Key. So it's spreading and spreading quickly. So the immediate response by ECAN and MPI is a delimiting survey. So here you can just see the areas of risk. Zone 1 being the highest risk. That's areas within and adjacent to the inner harbour, and other areas that are affected by tidal flow. So sediment coming out of the inner harbour being washed down the harbour. Area 2, 3, other bays within Littleton that are affected by tidal flow. Zone 4 is an area where our divers can't go and do the survey, but where benthic surveys are being done. So if you can picture a scallop dredge, it's the same sort of apparatus. And Zone MF is outside the harbour, Pūrea, and those areas where our mussel farms are. So if we have a look, here's a map of those zones. You can see the inner harbour, and then Zone 1 immediately outside, Zone 2, etc., around Cass Bay, Kottier Bay. Those zones have changed slightly. Zone 1 now being Kottier Bay and Cass Bay, where we've found outbreaks under fouled yachts. And if we have a look at the MF zoning, so we have our mussel supply vessels, the farming vessels that service those mussel farms, coming out of the infected area and heading around to those areas and those mussel farms. So we don't want this organism to spread to those areas. They're pristine areas. Thankfully, to have the license to farm these mussels, the boats have to comply with a clean hull policy. Thank you. So things to do, limiting survey is a starter, but we have to find a quick pathway through the red tape and introduce clean hull policy within Whakamutunga, Littleton Harbour. And the idea is to contain it within the harbour. We won't eliminate it, but we can control it. But we don't want it spreading anywhere else. Agencies tasked with enforcing clean hull regulations require the teeth to do so. So those agencies that are out on the water, the harbour master, have the teeth to apply the regulation and the law. And as we all know, as oceans warm, the introduction of invasive species by vessels will only increase. So rather than be the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, we need a clean hull policy in place to contain within the infected area. It's a given as far as we're concerned. We're working closely with biosecurity and of course Ngāti and ECAN, and we're making headway into a joint effort. Biosecurity and ECAN are wanting to put through a national marine pathway plan scheduled for 2027. So it's with urgency that I urge you to consider this and to find a way forward where those who are creating the regulations can enforce a clean hull policy just for Littleton Harbour. Nowhere else. I think if we try and expand and go wider, it's too much, you know, and I understand the regulations and how difficult it is to do it, but we don't have a choice as far as we're concerned, as far as Ngāti is concerned.
John, thank you for that. And I was impressed with your passion around this when I first heard you out at Rapaki, and it's good to have you in the room to put this in front of us. We have Councillor Karako, Councillor Robinson, Councillor Burns, Councillor McKenzie, and Councillor Duce.
Ai mihi atu kia koe John o ka uri o takitumu uri au tainui waka mihi atu. Thank you for your really articulate and impactful presentation. I have just one a question. Also want to acknowledge Paul Deutsch from Littleton, and obviously it's in your takiwā as well, Paul, so mihi atu. So with what you're saying is that even though you are the environment officer, that's your role, part of your role at Rapaki o Taraki Whakaputa, but you're also actually not speaking on behalf, but, or you may be, there are other communities, you know, programs around the harbour, Whakaropo, you know, that are working with you on this as well.
A communication with all the organisations, and this is for the work we're doing in the terrestrial arena. So we're having a hui, which is organised by Karen Bamwell on the 29th, bringing those communities together and informing them of the situation, because as we know, we all think the harbour's fantastic and it's a wonderful place. So LGP was a prime example, but we don't understand and we don't know what's going on under the water. And if we think the terrestrial is bad, I tell you what, the aquatic is horrendous. It seriously is. And I need 2 hours, Peter, to tell you about it. But yeah.
Can I just have one more just to make some observations here? Is that what we've got here is that we've just had this presentation, but right at the end of it, we've got some solutions that are actually being put forward. We've actually felt the need for this. So a quick pathway through, agencies tasked with enforcing hull regulations. Is that us? Not sure. The other part is the future of this, and particularly for our tamariki mokopuna. So that last one about the introduction of invasive species, if we don't do something about it now, well then what sort of a legacy is that to leave our tamariki mokopuna? Good, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Karaka. Look, I think, John, at the end of this, when we get to our resolution, that's the door that we all open. So we'll just wait for that to come along. Councillor Robinson, and then Councillor Burns, Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, John. I always enjoy the way you speak and with such passion. I just had concerns that this particular species may have effects on other aquatic creatures, not just surfaces, and you know, clearly it's got no other, you know, it's like an apex worm, I guess. It's got no what's the word, you know what I mean? Yes. So, and I also noted that the likes of Quail Island is in one of your zone ones too, and that's concerning considering it's an island that has had a lot of, effort put on it to eradicate the likes of rats and other creatures. So that is concerning. I was, interested to know if we could actually look at, some sort of bylaw change or something within our regulations to put a swift process on something. And I just wanted that to be put on the record to see if that's an option. Being a new councillor here, I need direction of what can be on offer for situations like this, which are clearly directing future for other species to come in. And when you mention also SailGP, how were they cleaned down when they came out of the water? What is actually happening to the washdown? I really need clarity on that too, please.
Just very, very quickly. You got some good people in ECAN that know the regulations well and are looking at that. For instance, moorings. So ECAN may be able to put in a regulation that goes hand in hand with the hiring of an ECAN mooring. So you have to have a clean hull before you can hire the mooring. So that's one option. The other one, that it's really those boats that have been sitting there that haven't been used, that haven't been serviced. And I've given a handout that you handed out for me today, Genevieve, that has all of those boats on there. There's examples in that it's bedtime reading, where you can see some of the boats. That survey was done in March, just recently after the outbreak was found in Kottier Bay. It shows you the conditions of some of those boats that are causing a lot of the problem.
Ngā mihi, John. I too thought it was very good. Thank you. I've got a couple of questions. One is around the derelict wharves in a harbour. And can you give us some insight as to Little Port Company, Christchurch City Council response to that at the moment?
We've been talking with LPC. We've got a good relationship with them. We've been building that over the last sort of 18 months. It's been like this for a while, but we have a good open relationship. And I think there is a willingness from the management to actually do something about it. But whether that's filtering down from the council itself and the board is another question. So we're working really, really closely with the top echelon of Biosecurity New Zealand. We're having a meeting with LPC on the 9th of May. And it's been, said that there is a willingness to do something about those wharfs. But we'll see what comes out of that meeting.
Yeah, thank you. That's good. That kind of leads on to the next bit. You've identified a number of the vessels that are moored around the harbour, which are risks. And can you clarify a little bit about the recreational boat hull cleaning facility and whether or not that's sufficient to operate at the moment? Thank you.
Yeah. So hand in hand with SailGP, which is a good outcome from SailGP, is the fact that council have implemented a haul-out facility at Naval Point. So that caters for quite a large number of boats, but it doesn't cater for all of them. So that is really an issue that we're trying to tackle and addressing at this time. So there is a facility there that's run by Naval Point for recreational boaties to pull their boats out, but only up to something like 10 to 12 tonne is my understanding. So when you get the bigger launches and things that are in Te Ana, they've got no facility other than Stark Brothers and the big dry dock, which comes at a real cost. However, if this clean hull policy is in place, it presents a business opportunity because people have to comply with the regulation. Now they can take their boat to Nelson or they can get it done locally. So discussions have to be had with council and LPC and Starks.
Kia ora, thank you for that. And if you haven't already done so, I would suggest too the Christchurch City Council meeting would be a great forum as well. Thank you.
Look, we're a long way into this, and we've got some people sitting patiently waiting to come to our table. So we'll take two more, one for you, Councillor McKenzie, and then we'll finally from you, Councillor Diche.
I'll try to be brief, but the clean hull policy, as it applies to recreational boats, and clearly that's an issue, John. what will that require? I mean, how many times a year will it require the boats to be taken out and cleaned?
Using as an example, down in Marina, it's a 26.5 metre. That work we did on that will last for about 2.5, 3 years. So it's like anything. If you've got a car, you look after it. It's probably your second best, the standard time.
So it's taking it out, clean the hull, and treat it once every 2 or 3 years. Right. So it's not a huge impact.
Okay, your turn, Paul.
Kia ora, thanks for that. And thank you, John, for a really good presentation there. Much appreciated. I used to live in Te Ana Marina on my boat. Was greatly alarmed when I lived on it, how quickly you could see the fan worm come in and establish. Can you, John, tell us, I note in your presentation you talked about the nutrient-rich environment of the harbor and that sort of thing. Do you know if things like the fertilizer unloading in the harbor and the drifting, which I, living in the marina, had to wash off my boat several times. Do you know if that sort of influence of nutrients into the water helps the fan worm to propagate?
Good question, Paul. We suspect it does, but we don't have the science to back that up, and it's really difficult. That's LPC property, so it's quite a delicate situation. But we intend to certainly try and we work closely with Frontiers Abroad to try and get scientists in there to study that. Maybe NIWA will be able to do it for us. It's certainly on the radar, and we've brought it to their attention that it's not acceptable.
Okay, great.
So we've talked to LPC about that very problem. Yeah.
Excellent. That's good to hear, and hopefully we hear back on that reasonably soon. I guess my other question is then, having been a boat owner myself in that marina, I know that the cost of getting my boat out to do a hull clean, and the difficulty of doing it, because it wasn't simply a quick out for a part of the day, scrub it down and put it back in the water sort of situation. You had to book in with with Naval Point. You had to get into their schedule for a cradle to get that out of the water into the hull out yard to do the work and that sort of thing. Is there any effort from LPC or one of the local companies to put into play a boat hoist, the cradle type that can quickly lift out a boat so it can be cleaned and then put into the water, and basically same day sort of thing?
These are things that we're investigating right now. So you're absolutely right. There's not enough facilities there, but there's also no, I guess for want of a better word, stick that pushes boat owners to actually pull their boats out of the water. And let me say, it's just like farming, it's just like travel agents, of which I'm a redundant one. There's really good operators, and the majority are good operators. There's just the few that ruin it for the rest. So most boat owners are responsible, and they do it. But there's just a few that don't, and unfortunately ruin it for the rest. And that's where the regulation needs to be in place, so it forces them to do it, basically. Yeah. I mean, we don't have a choice, in my view. In our view, NITO's view, we have no choice. It's got to be done. Should have been done in 2008, but it hasn't. And now we're left carrying the can, all of us.
Okay, thank you. Look, thank you, Paul. I hope you're finished then, Paul. Yeah.
Maybe one other statement was that for this 4 or 5 years that I lived in the marina when it formally opened, I know that there was a lot of discussion from the beginning about getting one of those cradle hoists to try and make it easier and cheaper for boat owners to do that. and living there and talking to other boat owners about trying to make it affordable to clean your hull, I was told about a lot of shortcuts, including beaching on some of the local beaches at low tide, are generally around Quail Island and that sort of thing, so that the boats could be scraped off there. But of course, that just puts it back into the water. So there's underlying issues and cost issues for boat owners that I'm personally aware of. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, John. Look, it's been pretty informative, and there's a lot of information that you've put in front of us, and there's a lot of interest. And I would tend to suggest that the reply to you on this will be, as I said before, open a gateway. And I know that Councillor Burns is chairman of our Biosecurity and Biodiversity Committee, and maybe he has an offline conversation with you also. So there's an opportunity there. So the resolutions on the table, on the screen there with some, I've got to move. Thank you, Councillor Karakia. Second by Councillor Ward. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against, that's carried. So thank you again, John. Yeah. So the next opportunity is for Nick Stoneman. Nick, you've got others with you, Nick, and they're welcome to the table also if they want to come up. So Nick is Senior Disability Service Navigator for New Zealand Disability Advisory Trust. He's here today on behalf of Southshore Residents Association regarding their issues with the Southshore end of the 60 bus route. And my discussion or my talk with Nick before this, he said he's well versed in doing this. And come on, do you want to sit up? A whole lot of you. Yes. Oh, it's a different presentation. I thought, are you on your own, Nick? All right. Sorry, my confusion. There is a crossover. Yeah. All right, Nick, when you're ready, we'll get going.
Good morning, councillors. I'm Nick Stoneman. Obviously, I'm Senior Disability Service Navigator for NZ Disability Advisory Trust. My purpose to talk to you today is regarding South Shore Residents Association issues with the 60 bus route at the end of South Shore. They have apologised, and they would have sent a representative today to speak to you, but unfortunately none of their volunteers were available, so it ended up in my lap. So to give you a little bit of context, I attended a meeting with South Shore Residents Association on the 31st of January, and at that meeting we discussed public transport. Now, SSRA's concerns around the 60 are that there are a number of issues, and I've got a list here. I didn't send it through electronically because it was a very quick presentation, but what they've raised is very, very, very important and does need to be addressed. One of the things that they really, really want out of their community is they want the reinstatement of an express service to the city. Now, while I'm aware that the 60 presently services that area, the 60 is not functioning. There are trips being missed, ghost buses. In general, buses turning. The next issue they wanted me to raise was buses turning around at the top end when going down to South Shore and actually not completing their trips and cutting off before they go all the way down Rocking Horse Road, all the way down Estuary Road, Rocking Horse Road, and down to the terminus. They also want that, so that's not taking into consideration people that are travelling. I have experienced this. I was forced to change it to go to my meeting on the 31st of January. I was actually forced to change buses at Bridge Street. I had to wait for a vehicle to come from Go Bus Transport's depot in Masons Road because the driver of my service decided that I wasn't important enough to go down to South Shore and they want to finish their shift early and swap out. So I had to wait, and that didn't impress me. That was on top of 2 cancellations that evening as well. So the first cancellation directly affected me attending the meeting. I had to catch a bus at well prior to the meeting because the next service was cancelled. Waiting to return home that evening. Thankfully, someone else who attended the meeting offered me a ride back to Eastgate, but I would have been subject to another cancellation, and that was the 9:03 service from South Shore to Wigram. It was cancelled as well. So they also want me to raise, obviously, what I've just raised about cancellations, multiple services in a row, trips being cancelled, no notification, lack of notification. They feel that they're not being listened to. They would like the reinstatement of the 5 to be considered. Now the 5, I'm well aware, does run between obviously Hornby, runs between your Brighton, Hornby and Rolleston, and provides a very high frequency service to those areas. There are a number of small fixes that could be completed on this, and the first one will be to potentially turn the 7:45 service in the morning from Southshore that only runs to the public hospital into an express into the city, back down via Bridge Street, and totally missing out Shirley, going down Pages Road and into town. Start a trip earlier, so change the timetable just a little bit. And I'm well aware that there's probably not a lot of money left in the budget to do that. So I am aware of that. I think these fixes can be done, and I think that it's incumbent on the council to actually consider these options, because if they're not considered, how is this community supposed to survive? How is this community supposed to survive on the present bus service when they're effectively disconnected? They're getting, as I said before, they're getting very upset because they've got multiple services being cancelled, up to 2, nearly 3 hours wait sometimes for a service. Even then, it's not reliable. They've been told previously that they were going to get a hub in New Brighton. That hasn't happened. There is no connection presently between the 60 and the 5 and 60 route and the 5 at New Brighton. So quite often what happens is the 60 will come in and the 5 will have pulled out, meaning that the passengers can't transfer from the 60 to the 5. And also too, the 60 is a very long route. It's presently set down, according to the timetable that I've looked at, is presently set down between 78 minutes and 90 minutes return for one trip. That's 3 hours return for one driver and one vehicle. That's a lot. It's also considered that the other consideration also has to be that when the 5 last serviced Southshore, it used to run all the way to Templeton, and it used to take an hour and 20 minutes to get across town, and that was going from right from Southshore, New Brighton, right the way through Eastgate, through the city, Riccarton, Hornby, and out to the prison, and almost out to the prison at Templeton. Subsequent to that, the reinstatement of an express service for Southshore would be really beneficial, because they should be having the exact same level of service that other parts of the city do have. It's not fair that one particular area is being subjected, and one particular area is being subjected to mass cancellations. I'm well aware that most areas are affected, but Southshore seems to be copying it quite a bit. So I guess kind of where I'm going with this is I'm here to advocate for them, to give them the voice around the table, and to make sure that councillors are listening and that you're willing to engage in this hot topic, because public transport is crucial. Not everybody can drive. And also too, that the other consideration is there are people with disabilities in the community, and they rely exclusively on public transport. And if they can't rely on it, and they have to get to appointments or anything like that, where they have to leave 3 hours before they've got their own appointment, that to me is not acceptable.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you for coming in and providing that detail. You're obviously passionate about this. Are there councillors that have got a question for Nick? Councillor East.
You mentioned that there had been multiple cancellations of a service. How was that? How was it transmitted, or was it transmitted, or did just people sit there and the bus didn't turn up and they waited for the next one and they didn't turn up, or was there some communication of some sort?
No communication. So bus doesn't turn up. It just doesn't appear, or it appears on the tracking. It gets to within 2 minutes of the bus arriving at the stop and just disappears.
Question. I've got a question for you. We've had discussions in the last week while about a reliable app. Do you use an app?
Yes, I do use an app, but again, that information for the app is taken from the ticket machine. So if the bus is not actually allocated, the bus is allocated to the service, and if, for example, the bus doesn't leave the depot in the morning, there's no driver available to do it. The time the bus is scheduled to leave, it then impacts on the system down the track, so it upsets the tracking for the rest of the day.
Kia ora, Nick. Thank you for your presentation. Just one part there is that the New Brighton hub, and you said that it was promised. How long ago was that?
Yes, it would be the last time. I will, and thank you for your question. Look, I will add that New Brighton was promised a hub in 2014. This was the last time any changes were considered. This is the time that the changes were mooted for the 60. And that was when Southshore was added to the 60 route. So it's been sitting there for almost 9 years and nothing has been done.
Councillor Teacher.
Kia ora, thank you. Going back to the app information, I note that on the Metro Info website information, I think there's not an exclusive app. It references a variety of apps that people can utilize depending on their preference. And I think that might be part of the problem, is that for some people, using one app works well for them, but they may not be getting the most updated information because it's not a app that that is linked directly to Metro bus routes and information, whereas another app might have varying information also, and round and round. And I've pointed this out in the past, that is a problem where we don't have that one central, most reliable route of information to put in front of the public. So that's just my 2 cents there.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? Thank you, Nick. Thanks for coming in. We've got a recommendation in front of us, and so we will close the loop back to you with some communication. And the resolution is on the screen there. Do I have a mover, please, for that? Thank you, Genevieve. Seconded by Councillor Davies. Moved by Councillor Robinson. Seconded by Councillor Davies. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against? That's carried. Thank you very much, Nick. And now we have the deputation from Denise, George and Gaye Meffan here on behalf of Southshore residents in South Brighton community to talk about their bus service. So welcome. Once all of us got you sorted out up there, you can start anytime you like once he's sorted you out, and you have a minute and you'll hear the bell go, which is timely, which gives you 9 minutes and gives you another minute.
Right. To start with, that this really is perhaps an adage to Nick's comments, because you'll see from my presentation that the background was I used to be on the Southshore Residents Association. Now, this whole issue goes back a long way. We are, in fact, now representing perhaps the Southshore and South Brighton residents who we know have been suffering for a long time. After the earthquakes, a community meeting was held by ECAN with regard to a possible route change in the bus service of Southshore and South Brighton. SSRA facilitated this meeting on behalf of the Southshore and South Brighton communities, which was well attended and very vocal. The majority of the residents, around 95%, voted to keep the number 5 bus route, as it was the most convenient for everyone. Regardless of the community's input, ECAN did not listen to our needs and went ahead with changing to the number 60 route. This route takes an hour or longer at some times of the day to get into the city, and for some people resulted having to take 2 or 3 buses to reach their destination. Therefore, we were not surprised when bus patronage dropped, although ECAN was, as people found it more convenient and time-saving to go back to using their cars. And I'm afraid I've got to say I was one of them. This was an understanding that after this initial meeting, the service would be reviewed by ECAN within 2 years and with community input. This meeting never eventuated, even with numerous requests from the community. We were also told at that meeting that as the number 5 route was now going to Rolleston, it would be too long a route for the drivers if it started from Southshore. Whereas within a few months of the number 60 route, it was lengthened to Wigram from the original Hillmorton, and that made it an even longer route than the number 5. As only the second number 5 goes to Rolleston, giving them a 30-minute service, we ask why the number 5 route could not have been Southshore to Hornbury every 30 minutes and New Brighton to Rolleston every 30 minutes. And this would mean maintain the 15-minute service on the main route between New Brighton and Hornby and a 30-minute service for Rolleston and Southshore. From our viewpoint, this would have been a very sensible and logical answer. Around 6 years ago, on our behalf, the Honourable Poto Williams organised a meeting with ECAN, council officers and interested parties to discuss passenger concerns in the future of bus service in the east. Council informed that meeting that New Brighton was to get a bus hub, and this was in apparently the council's master plan for New Brighton. And 3 routes would go into that and leave from the hub. And ECAN was not sure at that time which route Southshore would connect, but promised that the community would be part of that decision. There has never been any follow-up to that meeting. And as Nick said, no progress has been made on the New Brighton bus hub, and no communication from council as to when or if this is still happening. And from my information, apparently the council is no longer going to do a bus hub in Brighton. The meeting with Poto Williams did result with some connections that were made with council staff because, as you know, you don't deal with the bus stops and things. And we had bus stops put in to allow residents easier access to the buses from shopping, and also that we had the number 5 bus start from Oram Avenue rather than Bereford Street, eliminating the need for Southshore and South Brighton residents to have to walk around the corner or run in some cases to catch the bus. The current situation is, as Nick has said, the Southshore residents has run a bus survey for a week in January in response to issues being raised by the number 6 bus in social media, a copy of which I've also attached. This survey only served to highlight the conversations that residents who rely on the bus service have been having for quite a while, and the frustrations that they feel about nothing being done and that they're not being listened to. The main issues brought up, and this is by talking to the residents, we would like ECAN to look at the suggestion re the number bus route making it Southshore to Hornby and New Brighton to Rolleston. The number 60 bus is too long and does not meet the destination requirements for the majority of Southshore and South Brighton residents. We have lost the express route into the city early mornings and evenings for those working in the city. We were promised that the number 60 and number 5 bus schedules would align so that there would be no problems connecting. This has never been the case. Drivers do not always have their RTs turned on to communicate, but people wanting to transfer between routes either. Having not just 1 bus drop from the schedule due to driver shortages, but 2 or 3, there have been some instances when we've had no bus service in that area for 2 to 3 hours. Reliance on the Metro app from a bus timetable when not everybody has a smartphone or can use it easily. Why? We want to know were the electronic timetables that were at the bus stops disconnected. Metro app is not showing correct information. A bus is due when it doesn't turn up. Metro phone information is not always available at all times, especially evenings. And you cannot always get the answer to your query. In other words, they don't know why there is no bus. We have had a problem where buses are showing not in service when in fact they are. So therefore people don't put their hand out for them because the buses have just forgotten to try to just change the destination. Drivers sometimes fail to stop and drivers do not complete the route, as Nick has said, with no passengers on board. A lack of communication from ECAN concerning promised reviews of the service, which have never ever happened. I remind you that since the earthquake, our closest services are in New Brighton, and as those are somewhat limited, we may need to go to further afield for some essential services. Also, taking into account the demographics of Southshore and South Brighton, a large majority of the community are either the elderly or families who are struggling and have to choose public transport for shopping, doctors and hospital appointments. Should a bus not turn up, they risk being late for an appointment. Calling a taxi as an alternative, should they be able to afford one, is not viable either, as there are no taxis within the Brighton limit area. With no amenities in Southshore and South Brighton, and given that Rocking Horse Road is a dead end, we are more isolated than most areas, which make a reliable public transport system a necessity for this community. We have many residents who are being concerned with climate change, who would prefer to use public transport if it was more reliable than their cars. And given that Christchurch City Council put climate change high on the priority list, the large expanse of cycleways being built as an example, one would assume that a dependable public transport system which gives residents a greener alternative would also be a priority. Being aware of the announcement regarding 78 million being invested in the new network plan, we noticed that it appears to concentrate on servicing the new outlying suburbs, which we have no problem with, and increasing the already well-serviced areas from every 15 minutes to 7.5 minutes, which we do object to. The money that increasing those well-serviced areas, the cost could be spent on the neglected routes and isolated areas. And we believe that public transport should be as much about equity as it is about efficiency.
Again, thank you for that very detailed summary of the concerns that you have. We've got councillors that have got a question or clarification. Councillor Karakia.
Tēnā kōrua, Denise, Gaye. Thank you for your submission here, because in some ways it's actually important that this is done so that it can highlight the issues that you have actually articulated in your presentation. What I've actually looked at here, and you're with Nick's presentation, you know, the crossovers, is actually 4 crossovers. Yeah.
As I say, I was originally part of the SSRA, the South Shore Residents Association, and Gaye and I have been fighting for the buses for a long time. We were also at that meeting that Nick was at in January because of our background knowledge for the new committee. So yes, we are aware of that, and SSRA are aware of that we are submitting as well as, and they're quite happy for us to do that, because we feel that particularly Gaye, who uses the buses a great deal, we feel that we have perhaps been in touch with the people that actually use the buses, and we know our community.
Yeah, I wanted to make the point though that reiteration is really good. So it's good that Nick actually highlighted it, and you've actually just highlighted the 4 that I picked up, which was around the number 60 bus route being too long. Also, the promise of a number 60 and 5, because that was always promised about sort of linking those two together. The Metro app, which has come up, it's a common theme here and in other discussions we've had to date around public transportation. And the other one is the drivers sort of failing to stop. One thing that the question I've got here, so they're observations. The question I've got here is your final part of point 4, lack of communication from ECAN concerning promised reviews. When was the first promise of the review, seeing you've been there for quite some time? Can you remember? Which was when? 214, same. So there's another point of commonality. So the same idea as when the hub idea came about. So it was going to be that. Right. I think I just want to highlight one more point about the neglected routes. I was only at Ngahuia Whāmarae actually about 2 weeks ago, and this particular point came up about buses. You're absolutely right, because of you know, the socio-economical area, you know, that you've actually highlighted in this paper. A lot of our people, Māori people, actually are in that there as well, and so that was the point. So I just want to highlight that here to this meeting also, and to the 2 councillors actually that represent South Shore, New Brighton, that area. Thank you.
Thank you both for your presentation today, and I can commend that both these ladies have been very passionate about affairs in the South Shore, South New Brighton area. My question really, I suppose it's one that's a bit double-barreled to you and to staff, I suppose, is it seems to me to be a pretty simple solution that if the number 60 and the number 5 buses coordinated their departure from New Brighton, we wouldn't have a problem.
What happens at the moment in the peak times is that my number 60 South Shore bus leaves South Shore at 20 to 7, and it gets to New Brighton 2 minutes after the number 5 leaves. So yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Is that the number 5 bus should never leave New Brighton before a number 60 arriving. And that, in my mind, would obviously the number 5 bus going down to South Shore is ideal, is the better solution, but I can't for the love of me understand why a bit of effort can't be put in to make the number 60 bus coordinate with the number 5.
Thank you very much for that. And I think that's a good point. I think if we stayed here long enough, we could probably solve a lot more problems that simply. But there's no joke. Yeah, so we've got your resolution here in terms of completing this loop back to you with the information. It's moved by Councillor Davies and seconded by Councillor East. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against, that is carried. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you also, Nick, for your presentation.
Point of clarification, Mr. Chairman, we've had 4 deputations today. The resolutions are pretty much all the same. What content of reply to the various presenters today, is it just a thank you for your presentation, we'll get back to you in due course, or is there any detail of how we may address their concerns?
I think when we reply to people with their deputations, we do offer some information in those, but it also, as I said before, opens the door for that. So we can't just lie down on the fact that these people have come here and we've signed off and said, well, thanks very much for that. They're obviously people are looking for answers when they come here for a deputation, and that's the opportunity to supply that is in terms of getting back to them. We can check the validity of that in your eyes, Councillor Rees, if we need to, and see if that fits the bar that you're putting there for us. But that's my understanding. Now, Ngahuia, like, you've been very patient, and that wee one's been extremely patient with us. And so if you wouldn't mind coming to the table. So our next deputation is from Ngahuia Freed, and she is here to talk about the challenges with the public bus system from the perspective of a frequent bus user, with a mother with taking 2 children on the buses. So welcome, Ngahuia. Oh, are you going to do the presentation? It'll be quite long. Is there a slideshow, Oliver, or is it just a verbal presentation over here?
Hi, I'm Ngahuia. This is Giannis. I don't have notes or a slideshow. We are frequent bus users, very frequent. Actually, I have Giannis is 3.5, and I also have an almost 9-year-old. Now, I'd actually like you to do something. I would like to know, and it's a little bit confrontational, but I'm actually curious to see a show of hands of how often you as councillors actually take the bus. How many of you take the bus, let's say, 5 times a week? Less? How many? Yeah, how many of you takes the bus 10 times a week? None. 20? Once a week? So 2 or 3 times a week. So how can you really make informed decisions on what the service is like when you don't actually use it? Sorry, but that's just something that kind of really hit home. I really wanted to say. We, on average, take the bus about 24 times a week, if not more. My 8.5-year-old is at school in Aotearoa in town. This little one is currently at kindy in Shirley, although we live in Waltham. We chose Shirley because his father lives nearby and also his nana on that side. So he was there 3 mornings a week, and then he got a chance to see his nana, she's got lung cancer. She's been just undergone chemo and radiotherapy. So I'd have maybe an hour or so that they could spend time together before we'd have to get the bus to get my 8-year-old from school. Due to how the buses are, we've had to change that, and I'm having to look at changing kindies. Our main routes we have seem to be the ones that are most affected, the orbiter. They say, great, it's been changed to every 15 minutes. Theoretically, yes. Unfortunately, the hub and spokes model, it's not working. Eastgate, if that's your destination, awesome. But if you're actually going through it, which we do to get to Kindy, to get home, then often we are waiting over an hour. There is very frequently 3 or 4 buses lined up. Yes, paper, they go there, but they don't continue. Every time we get on the bus now, we have to ask, are you stopping at Eastgate or are you going through? This is both directions. Very frequently, there is 3 or 4 buses. The other thing that, again, yes, you look at the time. Okay, great, there's a bus coming in 10 minutes. Ticks down, watch, 2 minutes, and then suddenly it's 40 minutes. And it is disheartening. I have to make a decision whether or not I walk 3.6 kilometres home with my 8.5-year-old or this one, which we've had to do very frequently. So we go, well, okay, it's getting darker. Do we risk waiting over an hour for the bus, or do we get home in 45 minutes? So we say, okay, well, we will walk. The kids are tired. He's in a buggy, but still, we walk. And we say if a bus comes along the way, we'll jump on it. That often has not happened. So it's beyond a joke. 28 bus is our other frequent bus that we take. I'm sick of hearing, like, if there's a cruise ship in, often you can't get on it, and it's not okay because it's our mode of transport. I don't own a car. I want to teach. I've been teaching the kids that it's important to look after environment and to be more sustainable, but it's making it harder and harder. It does affect our lives. My 8.5-year-old, he's neurodiverse. He's autistic, ADHD, dyspraxia, and there's hypermobility as well. So he's sort of very, very floppy. He needs a lot of movement. We were doing circus classes in Brighton, which was great. He loved it. But the stress of not knowing if it was when we could get home, it finishes at 5:30. Then, okay, sometimes the number 5 bus will say it would show up. So we'd be waiting half an hour. Then we get to Eastgate. Hey, we might be waiting an hour. It just got too much. So he said, Mum, I don't want to do it anymore, although he loved it. And that's not okay. The thing that really, I thought, what's the point in actually talking to you guys, because it's not going to make the difference. But what actually kind of cemented it for me was on Sunday. I was so proud of Willem because he ran in the city to surf. He ran the 10 kilometres, which is a big thing for a 8.5-year-old. Now, you would think that if there was over 4,000 registered runners, that's a lot of people. you would look at a bus service. Okay, it starts at 7:29. There's a briefing at 7:15 for the people that are running. You really think that buses would go earlier for these major events? Like, seriously. So he was picked up at 6:30 to go. But Yanis and myself, we had to walk. Well, I had to walk 4.5 kilometres. I had to walk for almost an hour to get there to support him because there was no buses. Earliest bus was 28 that got into town. So it would leave our place approximately. You don't know if it's going to turn up on time or if it's not, generally. Yeah. So it would, I think it was about 8:12 potentially. Time it would get in about 8:19, where he may be crossing the finish line 8:30. I've got to rush there to make sure I'm there to see him crossing the finish line. But I couldn't take that risk, so I walked the 4.5 kilometres. And I have my own health conditions. Often I'm very fatigued, and I don't have the energy to, but I had to. And it affects all of us. It's not just the 28, it's not just the Orbiter, but those other ones that are worse. We travel on many other different routes, so we see the challenges. But I know that those two, and unfortunately, they're our main two ones, it really does affect us. So I think that's kind of what I wanted to say.
Cool. Thank you, Ngahuia, and thank you for being so honest and open with us about your family and the hurdles that you need to jump. So we've got a question from Councillor Robinson.
Sorry, it's not actually a question, it's just a comment on thank you so much for delivering that today, straight from the heart, and your Dewi lamb with you here. That was actually quite emotional for me because I too have a neurodiverse son. Sorry, but yeah, I really feel for you, and I hope we can resolve something. And no one's time at that table is ever wasted. We will somehow come up with an option that looks at everyone's needs. It may not cover everything, but I think we need to take this seriously because it's just a theme that just keeps coming over and over again. So thank you very much.
Councillor Davies.
Yeah, we've kind of attempted to get some of these matters raised at the council or at the transport committee, and we kind of feel sometimes as though we're not being listened to either, in particular by our chair, Peter Scott, who is actually the leader of transport in Canterbury. Do you consider reliability to be one of the most important issues that could be resolved?
Absolutely. I know especially for my younger one, who part of that, my older one, has anxiety is a part of it, and the not knowing, and you're just waiting and waiting and waiting, that stems into the whole day, and it makes everything worse. That just the not, where is it, how much longer? It's like, it's okay, you check the app on the phone, but whether or not it's actually going to show up then, so you just to try and make light heart of it. But it's hard when you've got somewhere to be at a specific time. Reliability is the big thing.
Thank you, other councillors. So thank you, Ngahuia. As I say, I mean, you've put a lot of stuff on the table for us to consider in terms of how you organise things to get you sorted out, but at least you've done that. And that's thank you for that. And thank you for your patience, because it was over an hour that you had to wait to get here. So we apologise for that, but we've had a busy day.
If my older one was here, it would be a different story. He wouldn't sit there. But yeah, it's not just, I talk from my own experience. It's not I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it affects a lot of people. But I guess last time I came and spoke to ECAN was December 2021 about buses. Most of you probably didn't talk to, and how it was, the challenges. In that time, the one thing that has improved is the patronage. A lot more people are using the bus, which is fantastic. That's probably because the prices have gone down, which that it had to happen. So thank you to the government for doing that. But that's also changing the way you need to look at the service, because other people, more and more people are using it. If it's more reliable, again, more people will use it.
Thank you. Listen, we've got the, to close this loop with your presentation, we've got that recommendation on the screen. Would someone like to move that, please? Thank you, Councillor Pauling. Have a seconder, Councillor Swiggs. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against? And that is carried. So thank you very much, Ngahuia, and what a patient little person. And I just don't know, Councillor Davies, did you throw me under a bus there? Figuratively. I didn't, I caught the end, I did just caught the end of it. Apparently, Councillor Davies, you've breached our standing orders with that comment. I've been advised, and I will offer you the opportunity to withdraw that.
Could you please clarify what standing order I breached? Could you please give me a rationale for that breach?
We will.
So if we turn to Standing Order 20.2, 20.2, it's on page 46 of the Standing Orders. No member at any meeting may act inconsistently with the Code of Conduct or speak or act in a manner which is disrespectful of other members, staff, or the public.
My quote said that he is the leader of transport in Canterbury. That is not disrespectful.
Personally, I have not got a problem with that. What was said, but we do have an audio file, and we should look at the audio file. We should check what's happened, and we should get back to you with that. So I'm reasonably comfortable that we move on here. I've got a reasonably thick skin, but I think the point being made here is a technical point about the conduct of councillors to councillors, and it was brought to my attention rather than my own assertion that there was something done there. So, Councillor Burns.
Yeah, good. I just want to say thank you, Chair. I think that's a really pragmatic approach to take.
Yeah, I would like to say, because I was offended by it. I thought it was a very nasty bug.
I actually didn't hear. Well, actually, I didn't hear it. I was.
Get the words verbatim.
Well, we're not going to do this anymore. Let's move to item 5, extraordinary and urgent business. And this is to daylight that there is some extraordinary and urgent business, and it is the report on healthier homes. And just to advise that that will be taken in public excluded. There is a motion there. I'll wait till we get it up. The motion is receive extraordinary Burgess urgent business, Healthy Homes Canterbury scheme report. Someone like to move that, please? It's moved by Councillor Sunkel, seconded by Councillor Karakia. All those in favour, please say aye. And do I need to move that we're going to put that in extraordinary? In public excluded, or is it? That's fine. That's fine. So to point 6. There are no notices of motion. 7.1 unconfirmed minutes from the Council of April the 19th, 2023. Are there any matters of accuracy? That's on page 6 of your agenda. Any matters of accuracy relating to the minutes of the meeting for this 22nd of March 2023? Have we got that? There are not. That's recommendation. Have a mover, please. Thank you, Councillor Edge. Seconded by Councillor Burns. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against, that's carried. Page 37 of the agenda, recommendations on the previous committee activities and minutes. So again, we're looking for any matters that need to be highlighted there. Did you want to speak to your matter, Councillor Edge?
Yeah, just to highlight that we received the Audit New Zealand Management Report for the year ending 30th of June at that meeting. And just to confirm that the report was an unmodified report, and they were satisfied that
the 2022 annual report accurately reflected Environment Canterbury's activities for the year and the financial position at the end of the financial year. So that was all good from our perspective. They also highlighted a few things that for action from our team, and they will be progressed over the next few months. So that was a good outcome.
Any comment or any question to Councillor Edge on that? There being none, move to the recommendation 8.1. It's on the screen. Do I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Sunkel. Thank you, Councillor Edge. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against, that's carried. So 8.2 is the status report. And we've got Robin available to talk to that if anybody's got any issues within that report that they want to speak to. Any issues of clarification required. Doesn't seem to be. We'll put that note's up there. Move for that, please. Thank you, Councillor Cramwell. Seconded by Councillor Edge. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, that's carried. Now to 8.3, the Chief Executive's report. Again, are there any I'll move to Stephanie. Do you want to speak to that, Stephanie, first? And then we'll look for clarification from you.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, Chair. There are 2 items to update as written in the report. Both responses have gone from the Chair to those who presented, to Aim Wangwan from Mu Robotics, but also to John Milligan with regard to the Food Bank Aotearoa. I'd also just like to highlight in particular in paragraph 8 that staff have shared their presentations with the Canterbury Waste Joint Committee and the Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Joint Committee as requested by the Council. Thank you, Chair.
Calling then Councillor Swicks. Oh, Councillor.
Kia ora, Stephanie. Thanks for the report. Now, I was just looking at the purpose for the Chief Executive to inform Council on the responses to the public forum presentations. Is there any possibility to expand the scope of your report every month to sort of look at more of what the Council's doing, like taking what we're putting on our website with our news updates and things, because the Council's doing a whole lot of good stuff. And I just think these are a really good opportunity. These are public documents. They go out to people who are interested, and I just think it's a great opportunity to sort of broaden the sort of what's going on with the Council. And it was just an observation that I made, and I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on it, really.
Thank you, Councillor Swiggs. It is a relatively new innovation to have the Chief Executive's report. I'm happy to adjust it appropriately. I think the key question too comes back to the Chair's report. The Chair has the prerogative to put matters into the public context in a manner that I do not. I certainly can with regard to operating. However, it may be appropriate for elected members to have a different conversation through the Chair's report. Could I suggest that I take that away and have a conversation with the Chair and determine the best outcome that also serves you and the public?
Yeah, look, can I just comment on that also, because I think Councillor East has raised an issue that we need to possibly look at regarding, so what are you going to get back to them on? So I think that that's something we need to do, and Stephanie will take that into advice there. Craig.
Yeah, kia ora. Just have a question about this report. In terms of the response to AIM about the robotic nose thing, I note that we don't have capacity at the moment to purchase and run that, but is there interaction between AIM and some of our staff in the area to explore things further other than just the purchase of it, but some of the ideas? Has that been looked at? Because obviously some of the staff that work on this weren't in the room on the day.
The information that's shared on the day is shared with staff within the organisation, so they have seen that. And there are continued questions around what kind of innovations, tools we could use into the future. Those are the kinds of things that should, in my view, come to an LTP conversation, and also a question of what we're responsible for monitoring. So I can follow that up with council appropriately.
Yeah, I was actually going to comment exactly what Councillor Pauling was saying. I just think, you know, considering the talks of today, especially about dust and the like, that could have been a very good opportunity to at least test something without, you know, money changing hands as such. I just think the technology, yeah, I'm pleased that the staff is still looking into it or getting more information. And just to add to that, some of these forums, it would be quite nice to see even a summary of the response from staff or you or the like, of what was fed back to those presentations. Thank you.
I also think council's got an opportunity to bring that up within their committee meetings. The issues have been raised. We have got back to them and given them a discussion. But for further discussion, I think you can talk to staff in terms of briefings and other means. I mean, there are some interesting things that are coming before us. I mean, today it's been an interesting opportunity to look at things, and there's some places that those conversations can fit. And I think we need to be aware that just because someone comes in here and makes a deputation to us and we sign it off with a recommendation, then that should not be the end of it. And maybe that's a bit of frustration from councils. We need to talk about that somehow. And maybe widening it out in either what I do or with what Stephanie does will help them. John.
Just to speak in support of Councillor Swiggs and thank the Chief Executive for taking on board the conversation. I believe at times there are a lot of things that we do and it's on the website or it's wherever. I just think a wee bit more daylighting might be useful, and how we achieve that, who knows, but I thank you for the consideration.
Thank you. Thank you for that discussion. We'll move to the recommendation which is on the screen there. Can I have somebody to move that, please? Thank you, Councillor Robinson, and thank you, Councillor Swiggs, for seconding that. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against, that's carried. And going to 8.4, which is the Council Navigation Safety Bylaw. And I think David Perenara O'Connell is the director responsible for come to the table, and also Ian Fox, who's Regional Harbour Master in the room. If we require you, it says. On page 73.
Morena koutou, kia koe te tiamana, koutou ngā kai kaunihira, ngā mihi kia koutou. Thank you, councillors. This report you've received today is with regard to the proposed review for navigational safety bylaws. The Local Government Act requires that we must review said bylaw within 5 years of it being put in place. The bylaw review we've put in front of you today is a minimal review of the bylaw, recognising that there is a larger national review underway, and so we're putting in front of you largely administrative minor amendments to improve functionality of the bylaw, but recognising that this will, before the next 5 years comes up, we will have a national review which will require us to update further. So happy to take any questions of clarity.
Yeah, just in regards to MRP 91, isn't it? Yes. Is there going to be much duplication of the work that's happening now with the consultation and then another consultation down the track? Is that the case that's going to happen?
That's exactly what we're trying to avoid. So the Part 91 review, we've already submitted into that. It's sitting at government level at the moment. But the intention there is that the aim nationally is to try and minimise duplication of rules. So that's the best option for us to avoid further duplication, is to wait for that to finish before we do anything.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I note that it's we have to review the bylaws. I'm just wondering if this is an opportunity to add scope to it as well, with regards to adding additional bylaws, or is that a different process as well? Or I know there's a national review coming, but it will address the overall navigational safety rules as opposed to regional interests and other bylaws. I'm just wondering if it's an opportunity for us to look at it further or deeper. Thank you.
The scope of navigation bylaws is very narrow. It's restricted solely to matters of safety. That's it. Technically, this bylaw has already been reviewed. The review process is quite perfunctory, and that was undertaken 2 years ago. So what we're presenting now is actually the amendment part of that. The amendments are quite limited. The aim here is that the amendments are small, of minor significance, purely of a technical updating nature. The intention is that if there is anything else major, it would go through at the same time that the major changes would come through at the national level, so that we can avoid having to potentially do things twice. Otherwise, there's a risk that we might make major changes that would then be overridden by the change of the national rules.
Oh, kia ora. I just picking up on Councillor Robinson's question, and I think looking at this section or part 27, particularly around the maintenance of swing moorings, and just in line with the presentation we had this morning, whether famworm or any of that thing is actually part of the maintenance schedule and also a safety. Does it come in? Is it classified into safety? Because depending on what you're talking about, the mooring. I don't know, Councillor Robinson, whether that was where you were going with that.
Yes and no. I just thought it might be an opportunity to tack on things that we see fit for this region, rather than just doing the ticking, crossing boxes thing. It might be just a small adjustment. I don't know, but if we can, take the opportunity. But yes to that, and no to that, a bit of both.
But just to give it some context, we were talking about famworm, particularly on swing moorings, maintenance of swing moorings. And basically, I'm trying to kind of link it into, safety as well, because when you look at biodiversity and all of that, that's about safety. So whether, I know it might be a bit narrow.
A long gun, and I don't expect you to answer that, either of you, because I think the opportunity there is that we pick this up in another way. We picked this up through biosecurity. Ian, did you want to speak? Ian?
The Maritime Transport Act is very clear that navigation bylaws are for navigation safety only, and that's the movement of vessels across the water and things related to that. Things like biosecurity are excluded, and we have actually had opinion on that. It's very cut and dried. Anything biosecurity related has to go through another path.
So just go on to another part of this, and I don't see any reference here around Mātaitau and around whether the safety, the navigation safety within the Mātaitau area around Rapaki. I know last time it was brought up by Councillor Pauling this morning about there's not a map on here, and within that it would show that there is a Mātaitau reserve actually, and I don't see any navigational kind of lights or equipment on that thing.
As far as rules other than navigation safety go, what we have done is created a boating guide for Canterbury that includes things like district council planning rules where they may affect boats and boating activities. At the time we did that, there was, if I remember correctly, an application to have the Mātaitau and Whakaraupo expanded to include the harbour. So we chose not to put anything in there at the time because it was potentially expanding. If that process is completed, and I lost track of it because it's not part of my normal work, then we can put a map into the boating guide so that people can understand it there, but it can't go in the bylaw.
My query was about the procedure of the bylaw and the need to go to consultation. Does the bylaw mechanism, is there a mechanism within the bylaw structure that these these relatively minor amendments can just be made and notified rather than go through a consultation process?
The consultation for this is because they're below the council's level of significance and the significance policy. Full consultation, like the special consultation process in the Local Government Act, isn't required, but it's generally considered at least good practice. And certainly, I would want, if I step outside the room for a moment, to be at least have somebody say, "This is happening. Would you like to speak to it?" And that's what we're doing at the moment. What we're asking you to approve is that we can seek public feedback on the proposed amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm mindful that I need to ask a question while trying to deliver a message to my colleague, Councillor Karakia over there. So later on this afternoon, the Chair and Deputy Chair of the Biosecurity and Biodiversity Committee are meeting with some senior staff regarding the likes of biosecurity hazards and risks. Would you expect that to be a suitable, appropriate vehicle to bring that matter up and progress it through council somehow?
It would be more appropriate than through the navigation bylaw, that's for certain.
Mine's a bit of a follow-up to Grant's. I am really interested in just what process of public feedback we are going to do. Can you just explain that a little bit more, Ian?
So the normal council process for this is to use the Have Your Say page on the council's website. That gets pushed widely through social media. Any channels we've got, any identified groupings we have, it's very easy to go through groupings. What we've found in the past is that once you get the message out there into the organised groups, the message gets very, very quickly into the wider parts of boating communities as well. So we have an extensive list of known boating groups and particular people that we know will spread the word. So that's already pretty much ready to go now through the comms and engagement section. As soon as I walk out of here, if you say yes, I'll go and have a chat with the comms advisor and we'll get the message out as fast as possible.
And that'll be the draft that's in here will be sent out and feedback sort. How long is that period going to be?
30 days.
And then the feedback that you receive, what will you do with that? How's that going to be taken into account? And is it coming back to us for a final approval after that, or to try and understand the process?
Yes, the feedback will be collated. We'll analyse what there is, identify if there are any particular themes, and with that, bring recommendations back to council. We're aiming for the July meeting for that, and then you get to make the final decision on amendments.
Kia ora, Ian. Kia koutou. Just in the Māori participation on 27 that you'll work with to your team and to work with Ngāti Wheke. But has any work been done prior to now with Ngāti Wheke, thinking that the bylaws are coming up, so kind of front footing that partnership that we want to see moving forward between ICANN and Mana Whenua? Has any work been done before now, or will it start from now?
So specifically consultation for the proposed amendments, it'll start now. So we do have a really good working relationship with Ngāti Wheke. Several of the team meet with people from Ngāti Wheke on a regular basis, including me, and we discuss matters of concern often. And so we do speak on a regular basis.
All right, thank you. I think we've concluded here with this discussion. Thank you, Dave, and thank you, Ian, for your input here. The notice, the recommendation is on the screen. I've been remiss to wait after we've got a mover and a seconder of any discussion, but I haven't seen the need so far. But can I get a mover and a seconder for this? Thank you, Councillor Swiggs and Councillor Sankel. Is there any discussion that's required on this?
Something that say now.
Yeah.
Kia ora. I just wondered, so how do you classify a minor amendment? Because to some people it could be a major amendment. I just wondered what's the formula?
My point with this is that this is a pretty pure sort of recommendation that we have in front of us. But what I will allow, and I'm not really comfortable at making about any amendments to this. But what I do want to know, I do want to understand the stretch that we were trying to achieve by getting outside what Ian was very specific on, which is a navigational safety bylaw, and wanting to include biodiversity and bandworms and other things in that. So what I want to understand, Councillor Karakia, where were you headed with that?
Not there. It was more around, how do you classify again whether, these are actually minor as opposed to medium or major. I just wondered what the formula was, Is it because they're actually a lot easier? You don't need as much consultation. Okay.
Well, what I would like to perhaps do after you move this motion, which is dealing with navigational safety, after after it's been processed, I'd just like to perhaps make a couple of comments with relation to fan worm in Littleton Harbour and how it's dealt with by the Biodiversity Committee, if that's suitable with the chairman.
So I just wanted to say, look, I'm really happy to see this bylaw updated, actually. It is pertinent to a lot of users on Littleton Harbour. There has been accidents on the harbour in the last 6 months, especially with paddle craft and motorised vehicles. So it's real important. So I'm really happy to see this be amended and updated. And I have some sympathy around the National Maritime 91 regulation that we're waiting on, because I have raised it before that there are issues around this bylaw with some particular craft that do go on harbour and do go in all around Canterbury that are currently not under the exemption when they probably should be, very much under the rules they probably should be. And I'm keen to see that fixed up, but I understand that the national rules will be hopefully trying to address that, because it's not just a Canterbury issue, that's a national issue as well. But I'm happy that we're doing a consultation, a public feedback process to allow groups and users to express those things that may be there, and that'll be great. It'll be great to see the results of that when it comes back to us in July. So yeah, I'm really happy to support it. Just noting, it'll be great to have the national guidance as well in time so that we can really update it and get some consistency. So thank you.
I was gonna make a suggestion, but I'll just say that. Okay. Yeah. So I'll just follow on with what Councillor Pauline said, and I just wanted to also say that it's quite heartening to see a bylaw that's having bits taken out, which is really nice to simplify it, which is really good. So I hope that the public would appreciate that it's actually simplifying, because as a user of these bylaws back in my day, around the world and around New Zealand, it's it's really complicated sometimes if you have really difficult bylaws to navigate. So this is a good step forward in my opinion.
Thank you. Look, I'll put this motion and then we can have a short discussion about this and then we'll break. All those in favour of the motion moved by Councillor Sweet, seconded by Councillor Tunkel, please say aye. All those against? That is carried. Councillor Mackenzie.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll try to be brief, but in relation to John Kottier's presentation this morning, and I talked to Ian and he assured me that it had nothing to do with him, and so I didn't want to bring the two discussions together. But I'd be interested to know, and I guess if Councillors Ward and Burns are having a meeting this afternoon, the number of recreational vessels moored or berthed in Littleton Harbour, and the capacity of the cleaning capability for disposing of legitimate cleaning processes in relation to the discussion we had this morning. And that would give us, and also the requirements of what bylaw changes would be needed to then police and enforce that on the boat owners in Littleton Harbour.
I'm absolutely delighted that Councillor Burns and Councillor Ward will take this on board. They've heard the discussion. They've obviously heard the concerns, and they can give us some recommendations about what we should do and how we should move this forward. It's an interesting area because, as John said, this is no different from farming. It's just that you can't see it, but it is a big threat. And he showed the photos of the mussel farms and others. And I think in terms of people's development around the peninsula itself, people wanting to get into all different sorts of marine farming, massive threat. So look forward to doing that. Craig, are you happy that we do it in that manner? Okay. All right, thank you. That was pretty valuable discussion. I think we'll break now for lunch, and we'll be back at 1, and we'll start with 8.5. Got 8.5 and 8.6, and then public excluded stuff to do. So see you at 1. And right, councillors, we'll start again. So thank you. Councillor Sunkel's going to be a little bit late, and I understand that Councillor Cranwell is on the phone out there. So we'll move on to 8.5. And 8.5 is recommendation on page 106, notification of items released from public excluded. And is Robin here? Robin isn't here yet. But no, we'll just move on. If there's any issues there, we will go to that. And here she comes now. We're just at 8.5, Robin.
So the purpose of this paper is for council to receive the report as a notification that the summary document responding to Councillor Davies' notice of motion regarding the live streaming of the council meeting was approved for immediate release. And that was actually by the Chief Executive to the public on the 23rd of March, 2023. And I'm happy to answer any questions in relation to that.
Okay. Thank you, Rob. Any discussion? Any clarification? Any issues coming out of this? Fine, Robin, thank you. Right, the recommendation is before you. Could I have a mover for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Mackay. Thank you, Councillor Swiggs. For seconding that. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against? And that is carried. Now, moving to 8.6, which is my report. So this is an opportunity with no staff at the table to have a discussion around the issues that we have, where we are with them. And the first one that we'll talk to is Rivers Resilience, which is sits directly with the Rivers Committee, but most of the discussion seems to be either at chief executive level or national level in terms of the machinations with ministers and others about how much daylight this case for money for our rivers is going to get. And at the moment, when we're in this pre-budget phase, we can hope that that money is going to be available. We've had some pretty good indications from those involved in the process that there's a good case there, especially in light of what's happened in the North Island and that massive recovery process that's going to take place there. Not all of that, obviously, is Rivers Resilience, but a lot of the issues up there were caused by rivers and slashing and other things. But it calls into question also a whole lot of other issues about the suitability under the climate change scenario or the higher rainfall scenario of the suitability of bridges that we have across our rivers and the spans that we have between each section and the ability for debris and other things to flow under those. That causes another issue, I guess, on the coast. But with you know, we've had 2 incidents in Tairāwhiti with slash coming onto a beach where one child was fatally injured, and another child just 2 days ago had a broken pelvis. Where playing amongst that, you know, a log rolled on. So, I mean, our interest in this is about the protection of communities. Our interest nationally also is to have some conversations with Transparent, Wakatahi and Kiwi Rail and Chorus and others who intersect our rivers, because there is a responsibility there for us to make sure that the rivers stay where we've put them. And there's a whole other argument around that about giving room to breathe and all those things. But at the moment, that's what we need to do. So, I mean, I can't talk too much more than that. Has any other councillor got anything you want to add, Genevieve?
Sorry, it was just a comment regarding the slash thing you were talking about. I've just come back from the West Coast. I went up through the Lewis and back through Arthur's. Huge quantities sitting at the side of the rivers and roads, just waiting for something to happen. I've never seen so many slashings at the sides. Worry.
It is a massive issue. I mean, we have willow slash that causes our issue, and we've got so many kilometres of rivers where willows aren't controlled. You know, and there's people are desperate to get control of them. But I mean, my interest now is I'm 90% of the way there, that we're going to get some of this money. It's about how we utilise it. And I'm pretty sure our rivers people will know how to do that pretty quickly. But then the oversight of that, because you won't just get a check. They won't give you a bucket of money to go away and play with. So there'll be a process nationally where this money is headed through. And I mean, the other thing about this, we think that this should be an apolitical process. That, you know, it doesn't matter who's got the rudder. This is an issue that's going to go on. Grant.
I was just wondering, in terms of the expectation for co-investment for resilient infrastructure, and we know that the climate change adaptation bill, if you like, act is still to come. Is there discussion within the context of that infrastructure thing to actually spend the money on something other than infrastructure? I'm thinking more of a requirement, say, from us to provide a whole river approach and look at land acquisition or other means to deliver safe flood control.
Yes, ultimately that is correct in terms of the width that you want to take this at this moment. And prior to this moment, it was a pure model for rivers. It was a pure model because, you know, there was an absence of some of the opportunity for us to work that was there pre-89. And so we were looking to get that opportunity back there and do a better job of what we have. The things that are coming along, obviously, now, like the issues that they have in the North Island, and how do you integrate that? And one of the discussions that we had, and you can speak, Stephanie, one of the discussions we had on Monday, led by James Palmer, was about adaptation and resilience in a wider context. And they're looking for input into that from people that have some, not skills in those areas, but have some knowledge of what's required and how to go about it and how to get in. And as I said before, you know, one of the really strong things that we spoke about on Monday also at regional regional governance is the fact that there was a well-developed model there. And you know, it was a bit begging bowl actually to try and get some of this money. But then when these things came along, that case was there. It was there. They didn't have to do any work on it. And it was just, the question was, how come it takes a disaster to get some action? And I think adaptation may be a bit different, Grant. It may be the fact that we can interact with that. And I think if there's anyone around this table think they've got the skills in there, then to help with that, then maybe we should look at it.
Look, I'd just make the point that I don't think it's particularly useful trying to split the difference between investing in infrastructure and adaptation. To me, they go hand in hand, and it's all part of the solution. And we should be focusing on the solution regardless of what the components of that solution are, and trying to split out the components into making different points around those solutions. That doesn't, to me, make any sense when the result will be we want to make the river safer for the communities who live in and alongside those rivers. And if you take the Ashburton River as an example, there is some adaptation going on, but it still involves investing in infrastructure. And the net result is that hopefully the community that lives downstream of that will be safer. And you use that same example across the whole of the region. So
anybody else on the rivers, I think we're in a position of anticipation, if you like. Great.
Yeah, look, I'm really looking forward to our work that we will go through in terms of river rating reviews and how we can look at that sort of more innovatively going forward. So yeah, I'm really keen to work with Ian as chair of that committee on getting stuck into that. So looking forward to it. I think that helps us as well.
It will be interesting whether the designation, I guess, of this money, whether it's for all works or is it for, you know, staff and design, and because we're desperately short of river engineers. I had Peter Haddock from the West Coast Regional Council here yesterday. He's their chair, or their new chair, basically saying they've got one river engineer and that person could leave anytime soon. So what would they do? They would come across, knock on your door, Stephanie, for help. So we need to be aware of that, you know, that opportunity. So, okay, the second thing we've got here and is resource management reform, and again, just I guess an update from that session on Monday, where we had Minister Parker in the room talking about resource management reform. He was of the opinion that the two acts that have been consulted on and have been before the select committee will go through their process in the current time available for government to put that into legislation, which is interesting because of you know, the very strong submission that was made by ourselves, Environment Canterbury, also by the regional governance group, and also comments that have come out from the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, who pretty much echoed what we were trying to say to him. The advice that's come from environmental people involved in the environmental law space, and then some comment from the judiciary about suitability about these things. But it seems the minister believes that that's going to happen. One of the things that he did point to right at the end of the process was one of our major concerns was the Regional Planning Committee and the makeup of that, which looked to sideline the regional council's expertise and involvement in the regional in the spatial plan. He pointed to the fact that that's noted, and he pointed to the fact there will be an opportunity for subcommittees to be formed. You know, so do you still get one person on the subcommittee? I don't know. That's still not I guess, a black and white decision for us. But he did believe that the select committee had given good feedback on that, and there was going to be a possibility that that was going to move forward, and that we shouldn't worry too much. I'm not too sure if that takes the fear out of the room, or the concern out of the room, but there we are. Anybody got a comment or a question? I don't want this just to be a narrative from this end.
I mean, just on that RMA reform, I think we should note some of the comments that were made at that select committee, and how unusual some of those comments that were made are, especially from the judiciary, and how problematic they believe that some of these things will be for the local, for local government. And so I think that should be noted, and we should be actually keeping an eye on those comments and communicating those to our public, to our communities as well, because it's very serious, the way that it's drafted at the moment. And if it's going to go through the way it's going to go through, there's going to be some major unintended consequences, as were pointed out in those select committee presentations, and I do think we should probably have a look at those as well.
I just have to be careful because it's what's factual and what I've read. But I'm quite sure I read in the media recently a report that the chair of the select committee spoke to a group in, I think it was Auckland. Can't remember what the group was called, but the suggestion was, as I read the report, that it's quite likely that she would send it back for further consultation. So it's my interpretation of that, and that was relatively recent. A little bit different to what you're hearing from the minister, but I guess the minister decides in a way.
I don't like to shed on that at all. I mean, the minister is the minister, and it's like our interpretation of what's in front of us are the things we have to do, not the things that we anticipate will come along and anticipate that there'll be a change here and a change there so that we can actually wait. We can only eat the stuff on the plate at the moment. And you know, that's the stuff that we're giving. That's the stuff the minister has given me. Speculation about the process after that, speculation about what the government might look like, speculation about what their government may do about this is speculation. You know, that if we have a government that is similar in stature to the one that we've got now, then we know what's going to happen, don't we? We've got a Resource Management Act. We know what it looks like. It's going to be a process that is going to continue. And I think that's the point that's been made all along, Stephanie. We can only deal with what's in front of us. I'd like to think a lot of things would change, Claire, but I'm not sure. Anybody else?
Yep. Kia ora, Tiamana. Are we engaging with, you know, any of the other kind of shadow opposition spokespeople? Yeah, thank you.
Well, we have. We've dealt specifically about a couple of issues. One is the Ngāi Tahu representation on this council, which is made pretty clear. If we have a change in Wellington, then you know that may be one of the things that may change. It may, you know, as I said, that's again speculation on their behalf. We've had an early engagement also on transport. Because I don't think there's a massive understanding of the detail of what's going on with transport in Christchurch, what the future plans look like, and maybe we can talk about that when we get to the next topic, which is the Greater Christchurch Partnership. Did you have enough put?
I was probably referencing more to the RMA reform.
The only comment that I've had is a very brief conversation with Chris Bishop about that. He was on the select committee, and basically saying, you know, that there was a degree of satisfaction, which we've also said there was a degree of satisfaction there. But at the end of the day, the select committee reports back, their recommendations are either taken or not taken, and then that is rolled out into legislation. So, what does that look like? I don't know, but I mean, I think the point that we should note is that Minister has some sort of determination that those two bills, the Spatial Planning Act and the National Built Environment Act, will get daylighted by the end of this term. Now, we know that there's not a lot of time left, so, you know, there's a bit of urgency required around that, I would have thought. Anybody else? Okay, Grant, I'll get you to talk about Greater Christchurch Partnership.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just briefly, we had a meeting on the 14th, and we had sort of 3 key presentations, and I think those presentations are coming to us tomorrow as well. But just a heads up, really, our first presentation was from Waka Kotahi about the Mass Rapid Transit indicative business case that they've developed, and that was an exciting business case. And then from that, that goes through a bit of a process, and then they further develop that into a detailed business case with facts and figures and all sorts of things. But at this stage, yeah, it was a good presentation. The second one was an update of the community engagement with the Hui Mai draft report on the spatial plan, and that took about 6 weeks, and there were over 7,000 people participated in that engagement. And of those, 84% agreed that future population and business growth should be accommodated through focusing around key urban towns and centres and along public transport routes. And that's where the MRT project comes into play. And people, about 40% of people were open to living in high density housing in the future. And the key things for them, or some of the key things, there's a whole list of them, but provision of green spaces was important. Quality and design of buildings and neighbourhoods was very important. And all aspects of the natural environment was with a special focus on rivers, on waterways. That was really important too. So it was good to hear what their feedback was from the public. And then the third thing, which is the draft Greater Christchurch Spatial Plan, and that plan was all about looking towards 2051 and a growth to about 700,000 population for Greater Christchurch, and then that will extend in time to about 1 million people, perhaps. And that's really aimed to deliver a process for better coordination between central government, local authorities, and mana whenua. So that's all pretty good. And we've got the next steps for that is on the 12th of May, we've got a meeting of the Urban Growth Partnership with the government. And the aim of that is that there'll be some kind of endorsement of the spatial plan. And then from there, the partner councils will also endorse, and then that'll be endorsed for further consultation. So it's an exciting process, and I think tomorrow, hopefully, people will be really excited about the direction, because to me, it's created a very clear vision. The narratives throughout the whole spatial plan report is very clear, well written, and I'm waiting for the final draft.
Swigs.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the hui hui mai and the spatial plan, in light of what we heard this morning, is setbacks being considered in that spatial plan around residential and activities such as quarrying?
I'll really answer that. That's kind of a detail, probably further, further on.
Okay, so could I request that we ask that question through that process?
We certainly ask the question, but I think it's a matter of detail at a planning stage, which is separate to the actual development of a spatial plan. Yeah, that's my understanding.
I just think it would be remiss if we didn't actually start talking about that, from a health point of view. So, I mean, we have an opportunity to sort of drive some of that conversation within the Greater Christchurch Partnership. So I think we should be, in light of what we've heard, we'd be remiss not to just mention it.
Yeah, can Catherine just quickly advise on it?
Ben Rhodes, who's leading the spatial plan process, will be in as part of the presentation tomorrow. So it's certainly a discussion we could pick up then. And Sam Bellamy and our team's actually been doing the drafting of it. So, I think, Grant, you're right. It is a detailed layer that goes under it, but it's certainly, it can certainly be raised tomorrow.
And I think Jess, who's been involved too, is pretty aware of the dust and the setback issue. So hopefully, previously it has been something that has been discussed. So I'm hoping that it is. So it'd be good to raise tomorrow.
One of the interesting things for me it has always been about this is because it started out about urban development and how do you get the people around the right infrastructure and the investment along that infrastructure to achieve, the growth patterns. And the penny drop for me was that the most efficient way to do that is light rail, because light rail, you can't pick it up and take it anywhere else, whereas you can drive a bus around a corner and take another route. So the investment that comes from having a permanent facility like rail attracts early investment in those areas for people that get a wider range of travel opportunities, businesses, and then a change in land use around those things. The corridor that they're talking about at this stage is a 22-kilometre corridor between Hornby and Belfast, essentially. But my lack of understanding of that was clarified. And interestingly, the difference in the business case between, and the billions, right? But the difference in the business case between buses and light rail isn't that massive. It isn't that big. So it would have been something that I would have said, if you said light rail to me, I would have said, don't be stupid. You know, it's failed everywhere. But the presenter who put that on the table said, you need to take the opportunity to look at that in terms of what you're trying to achieve, not what's happened in other places. And I think that's a really good way of looking at it. So I might be a light rail enthusiast here. Anybody else? Grant?
Well, yeah, because related to that, we had a really good presentation from the Waka Kotahi guy there talking about the benefit cost ratio that they were looking at. And in both cases, whether it's rail or bus, there was a light at the end of the tunnel kind of thing. And it seemed to be pretty positive. So that was good. Well, you know, maybe an underpass.
This next one is just an opportunity to talk again about the future for local government. I know that Craig has made did some media on that, Craig, and in terms of your views on that, and I don't know if you've received any feedback on that. And again, what's changed? So the thing that's changed is the water entities' boundaries have changed, and you know, what does that present? And we've gained Waitaki, which is awesome. Tiger might not be very happy about that. And we've gained the West Coast too. So, but the other interesting thing that is it's been pushed back to 26, 28. So again, a ball we thought we were playing that with, which might have been in front of us soon, has drifted off, and I think that that's just the government looking at the priorities that they need to get in front of them, and obviously RMA reforms sit higher than some of the other things. Has anyone got a comment about? Yeah, Craig.
I mean, I think the media sort of opinion piece we did was really picking up on the points in our submissions that we made to the central government about the future for local government, and you know, really emphasising the importance of the role of regional governance, in fact, rather than just local or city or district governance, or in fact unitary authority. So we sort of made the point that you know, there's a lot of things that are cross boundary, rivers, for example, that sit between city and district boundaries. Who looks after them if it's not regional government? So you know, those are the sort of points we tried to make. And that in particular around the relationships with mana whenua, that it's often regional councils that have led that space rather than city or district councils, partly because of those Article 2 environmental commonalities we share with mana whenua. So they were some of the things that we sort of pointed out, and that bigger is not necessarily better when it comes to local government reform, and actually taking the time to make sure we design something that we're actually going to be proud of going forward, and that actually works and that's effective. So the other sort of things that we highlighted. So
I think there's a couple of points there that we need to also I'll reflect on again from a conversation in Wellington on Monday, where we're looking really strongly about how regionally we fit with local government New Zealand, which is TA dominated. And you know, if we got to vote, we wouldn't get across the line. There's 16 of us, or 15 of us now, with Auckland doing their own thing. But the point that they made, the point that chairs made and the CEs made quite strongly, is it's a New Zealand view that sits in when regional councils get together. They've got a New Zealand view. If you want to get to those communities, talk to regional councils, because they get them really quickly. We can get across our region with the Mayoral Forum. We can get across our region, and most regions can do the same thing. So then you should not discount the ability to have community within the region. And I think that's a really strong point. And I think that that's something that the regional governance group will build on, actually. They made the point that CEs and regional, not so much chairs because they haven't done this, but CEs can get to ministers pretty quick because they're the issues that, they're on their table and they can get there. So I think maybe what the learning from that is we've undervalued that. We've undervalued how good the communication can be if we concentrate on it. And I know the chairs are really keen on getting more an opportunity to travel around and meet other councils and find out how they operate. So thanks for that. The recommendations on and I think we need to consider whether this is worth doing or not, actually. Chair's report, I think it is. The information that comes out of this can be valuable, and as we develop it, we can do more. And I would certainly seek issues that you think need to be daylighted to come to us for that to put into this report, and then we can talk about them. All right, so that recommendation is on the table. So mover, thank you, Grant. Second, and thank you, Craig. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against, and that is carried. Now we've got to public excluded, and I think the first thing we need to do is look at who we need in the room. And I'm pretty sure we've got everyone in the room we need. It's the people online, stay online. I don't know how we handled you, Paul.
Have a PX link.
Have you got a PX link?
Is that the next one, I think, on the schedule here? Let me try that.
Yeah, just a minute, Paul. Just a minute. So I have to talk to you or add you. So the recommendation to go to public excluded is on page 113. However, staff provided an updated staff recommendation, including extraordinary urgent and healthy home scheme report, which is now on PX. That Kieran Tagney, Senior Advisor Corporate Services, and Karen Bartlett, Asset Manager, remain after the public have been excluded from 9.2.3 of the public excluded agenda, as they have knowledge that is relevant to the items in System Council. And that item 9.2.4, extraordinary and urgent business, Healthy Homes Canterbury scheme, be excluded from the public for reasons stated in section 7.2G. The withholding of information is necessary to protect the legal professional privilege, and section 7.2.I or 1, or is it I? The withholding of the information is necessary to enable local authorities to carry on without prejudice or disadvantage negotiations, including commercial and industrial negotiations. In other words, the report and attached contains information that is confidential and legally privileged, and the withholding of the information enables council to continue negotiations without prejudice. Due to the nature of this report and attachment, they can never be released from public excluded. So that's a good point. And that I need to put there. Yeah, at 1:35 p.m. the resolution to exclude the public set out on pages 113 and 114 of the agenda be adopted. Does anyone not understand that? Yeah, so we need a mover, please. Thank you, Dion, and seconded by Councillor Cranwell. Not you. Sorry, Craig. Moved by Craig, seconded by Councillor Cranwell. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against? You're against. You want that recorded? You want to stay in pub? You want to stay? You want to stay, but you don't want to go in. You want to stay in public excluded, but you're voting about going into public excluded. So I need an explanation around that. Just trying to work out your reasoning around this, actually, Councillor. You don't have any. All right.
It was decided they have, so majority wins.
Okay, thank you for that. So we're at the end of this. We're out of public excluded. The next meeting of this council is on the 17th of May at 10:30. I now declare the meeting closed. And Greg, are you ready to do a karakia for us?
Sure, I am. Started the meeting by saying that as governors of ECAN that we needed to challenge each other through respectful discussion that we could deliver through our dedication, and that actions save the environment in our communities. I will close now Unuhia, ki te tūru uru tapu na ui o tāna. Kia watia, kia mama, kia nākau, te tinana, te wairua I te ara, te kata, koia rā I rongo, whakairia aki ki runga, ki tīna, tīna, haumi ai, hui ai, tāiki ai.